Hello, everybody. My name is Tim McCarthy, and I'm going to give you a video tutorial on how to do bots in Azure. Specifically, this is a QnA Maker bot, and kind of what inspired me to do this video is that you can follow the tutorials on docs.microsoft.com, and those are good, but you're doing it all manually. So there's some things that, like when you go into the Azure portal and manually provision, you say you want a new bot, you want a new QnA Maker bot. There's a lot of things that UI takes care of for you in that manual process that you're not going to be able to do. So I want to share just some of the tricks that I've learned to get this automated. So what you're looking at right now is just the Visual Studio solution. This is just the actual bot itself, so it doesn't really matter what it does. It's this is very simple bot. It's it has a knowledge base it's connecting to in QnA Maker service, the cognitive service. So the bot basically just takes your question, forwards it to QnA Maker, and QnA Maker is set up to do multiple turns. So we can actually take a look at it. Here's my knowledge base right here. You can see here we have this capability to do follow-up prompts. So you can you can do things like putting in kind of like an outline here. So if somebody types in a component selection frame, you'll see an answer right here, but then you'll have 3 prompts. And when the user clicks on one of those prompts, then they get more information about doing those particular actions. So the first thing is that the regular bot that comes with the template that you download from the Azure site when you're creating a bot, if you're doing it in C# or it doesn't matter what language, it doesn't support multi-turn. So I actually, my bot had to do a few things. I found a couple of articles and some GitHub repos where they were doing supporting multi-turn. So this bot does do that. You can see I just have a couple of dialogues here that basically this is the main one here. This dialogue takes care of the main thing that it does is it processes the prompts. So when it answers a question, it checks the metadata that came back from the QnA Maker REST service, and it just sees if there's any prompts in there, and then displays those as hero cards, and that's cool. I think the main thing I really want to concentrate on here, though, is how do you get this deployed? How do you get a continuous integration, continuous deployment process set up? So I'm using Azure DevOps here, and I have that set up. So I actually have 3 different pipelines. I have the basic build, so just build the artifacts, and I actually have this tied to my pull requests, and so every pull request will just execute this build, and then I also have triggers on this build. I have triggers to execute that build, or I'm sorry, not execute the build. So once a PR is accepted, then the deploy bots, the bot deploy pipeline will take over and go ahead and deploy those artifacts. So if I go in here and edit the pipeline, now I don't do it here. I do it in Visual Studio Code, but just showing you we're doing YAML pipelines here. And so you can see here, there's the triggers, and also the resources is the bot build. So it's actually listening for that build, or it's using the resource, it's using the artifact for that build. I don't actually have this connected up. I don't have a trigger on this to automatically deploy the code. I could easily add that though. What I do have triggers on though is the infrastructure. So there's 2 things here. There's code, so the code for the bot, this is the code, and then the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is my ARM templates, and I actually have split the ARM templates up into 2 different ARM templates. So the first ARM template, all it does is it deploys QnA Maker. So let me go to JSON outline here, so you can kind of see the resources that we're creating. So you can see here, here's the QnA Maker service, which also needs a search service, and it uses a it has a an app service as well. And then the app service needs a hosting plan, of course. And I have a storage account here because I have exported my knowledge base into an Excel file, and my deploy pipeline actually takes that Excel file, and because we've checked that Excel file into the repo, it actually takes that, puts it into a storage account, and then we call the API for QnA Maker to go ahead and import that Excel basically like a database, that Excel file for the knowledge base. But it has to be on a publicly available domain. So I put it into a storage account, and I put a shared access token on it when I want to retrieve it. So anyway, so what's kind of cool about this, let's switch over into Visual Studio Code. And you can see here, I have, here's the pipeline, here's the Azure pipelines for bot and infrastructure. And so infrastructure is really just concerned about, with the ARM templates. And so it's listening in on, obviously, if I change this YAML file, then it's going to go ahead and trigger a deploy. So this is GitOps right here, basically, right? So you do pull request, you change something in this configuration, either in the pipeline or the ARM template itself, right? So it's listening in here in this folder for changes in the ARM templates. If it detects that, it's going to run this pipeline. Now, this only happens if you do a pull request. So I have my develop branch protected with a policy. So if I go, let's go into branches. Oops. Here we go. Let's go into branches. I'll go to my develop branch. You can see here, it's got that policy on it. So I will go ahead and take a look at that. So you can see, yes, this is protected. Requires a review. It runs this build. Okay, so nothing gets into the develop branch unless it goes through. It has to have a pull request, and it has to be approved, and the build has to pass. So that's the gatekeeper. So once that happens, though, it will execute this, and so once that pull request gets merged into the develop branch, if depending on what it's affecting, if it satisfies one of these triggers, it's going to execute this pipeline. And this pipeline, first job is going to do the infrastructure deploy. So this is basically, well, whole job is for infrastructure deploy, but the first step is the QnA Maker infrastructure. So ARM template for QnA Maker. Then what I do is there's some things from when I create the QnA Maker resources, I need a few things in there that to use later on. So I copy some, I have some outputs from that ARM template. So if I go into my ARM template here, and I go into, let's go to the bottom down to the outputs. You can see here I have the, I'm going to need that runtime endpoint because I need to know how to call into that. And then the QnA Maker key, that's the key to actually that's the Cognizant Services key. And then the storage account name, because that's going to get created to store that Excel file. And then the app service name, app insights name. We need those later. So that's why I put those in the as outputs. And so this is doing this task right here is executing that ARM, or I'm sorry. That's not, this task is executing the ARM template right here. And then once that happens, so this is right. So what this does is this is a variable. So this is a build variable that's going to hold all those output parameters. So once this task or this step finishes, the output of that ARM template that I declared is going to go as JSON into this build variable. So then what I do is I turn that into an object. So I call convert from JSON in PowerShell, and then reference reference that build variable right here. And then I just take each property that was in there, and this looks a little bit funky, but this is basically writing a build variable so that I can use that later. So I'm capturing all those properties that were in the output from the ARM template and just putting them in build variables. That way I can use them later on. And what I do, next thing I have to do is take that Excel file that has the knowledge base in there, and I can actually bring that up. Whoops. You can see right here, here's that Excel file. So I can just open that well, maybe not. Maybe I should reveal that in the File Explorer. Yeah, I'll go ahead and open that real quick. So you can see it's a basic export of what was there, but it's great because it allows us to take what's in one knowledge base and go from environment to environment. So it enables us to automate that. Now this is a pretty simple demo. It's just a prototype, so I'm sure you could do a lot more elaborate schemes, but this is kind of showing you one way to do it. Okay, so this task is putting that up into the storage account that we created that storage account in this task right here for the Azure ARM template deployment. And now we want to use that here. And so because we have those outputs copied, we know that the storage account name is this, right? Because that's a build variable now. And then we're going to say we want this to be the container name. If it's not there, it'll just create it. And then this is kind of cool because now we can say, hey, for the container URI, I want to capture that in a build variable. And then the SAS token, I want to capture that in a build variable also. So this is basically just copying that Excel file, this whole taskbar here, copies that Excel file into that storage account, and then basically gives us the metadata around it so we can retrieve it later, which we'll need to do. Next thing I need to do is I need to check to see if that knowledge base already exists. So you can see right here, I have this knowledge base actually does exist. We can go ahead and delete it, but I go ahead and check to see if it exists so I don't create it over and over. So it's idempotent. And I just check on the, so what I do is I make a call to the QnA Maker API, the REST API, and I'm calling the knowledge bases endpoint. And this is going to give me all the knowledge bases that my account has access to. And then I just I iterate through and say, oh, okay, well, if it has the same name as the knowledge base name, then let's get the ID for that and then say, let the rest of the build steps know that it exists. So that's cool. Then I do the next step. I say, okay, well, if it did exist, then right now I haven't built this out yet, but I would make a call here to do basically like an update of the knowledge base. I think they have actually the endpoint is called replace. But in the case it's not there, then it's going to create it. And so it's going to make a different API call, and it makes an API call to the create endpoint for QnA Maker. And you can see here, I'm just building up the headers. Now this is the most important thing here, is this OCP APIM subscription key. So this is the key that is coming from your cognitive resource, your QnA Maker cognitive resource. So that was also captured in the ARM template, right? So this is something also got captured when I cycled through all the outputs from an ARM template and cycled through the properties and created that kind of dynamically. But if I go into that ARM template, you can see here, it's called QnA Maker Key. And here it is right here. That is, you need that that endpoint key to your QnA Maker Cognitive Service. That's your key that you put in your header. That's how you, that's like your authentication or gives you permission to call this REST endpoint right here. And then if we want to just kind of see where that's at, we can go in to that cognitive service and just click on keys and endpoint, and you'll see here, here's the key. I just grabbed the first key. So this is it right here. And you can see where I grabbed that QnA Maker key. It's listing the keys for that cognitive services count, where the name is what I've named it in the template, that variable. And you can see here, I'm just choosing key 1, which is this one right here. So I'm going to get that value. And you can test this all, use Postman to check it out and make sure it works and everything. If you get errors and stuff, just for troubleshooting, use Postman. So the purpose of this is checking if it exists. The purpose of this is to create the knowledge base or update the knowledge base. And then, so that's basically create, update, upsert, I guess you could call it. Then the next one is I need to get once that QnA Maker knowledge base is created, I need to get an auth key for it. So I can actually not call it a cognitive service, but actually call to the new knowledge base that got created. Because I need to be able to give that to my bot needs to know how to talk to the knowledge base. The bot doesn't care about the cognitive service. The bot cares about that QnA Maker knowledge base because it's got to forward questions to the QnA Maker knowledge base. So the bot needs some metadata. The bot needs, and actually, why don't we look at that right now? So the bot, let's go to app settings. It's kind of easy to see there. The bot needs what the knowledge base ID is, the auth key, that's what we were just talking about, and then the endpoint, which is the app service, the endpoint hosting, which is the app service that is where the actual QnA Maker is executing. So if we come back here, this is how I get the auth key. And you can see here, I'm doing the same pattern. I'm putting that in the build variable because I know I need it later. So you can see here, it's got that endpoint key. And I went ahead and executed this in Postman, and I could verify the return so I knew what kind of data I was getting back. So that's the auth key. Next thing I need to do is I need that knowledge base ID, right? Because the bot needs the knowledge base ID. So I need to, now you can see here, like for development, so this is local, right? I can put these values in here, but when this gets deployed to Azure, it's going to ignore these. This is just for local development. When this goes in Azure, whatever's in app settings in the or the configuration, the app settings configuration for the app service, it overrides this. It doesn't. These aren't used. These are, if it wasn't in Azure, then it would use these. But if it's in Azure, the way the configuration system works in ASP.NET Core, it's going to take what's in Azure over what you have here. So that's kind of, so this is getting the knowledge base ID. I just make a call to get all the knowledge bases again, and I go through and see if I can find the knowledge base ID, because there isn't a REST point to get a knowledge base ID by name. So I get all of them and then cycle through till I match the name. So the next thing I need to do is publish the database, because if you make calls against your database and it's not published, it's going to be, you're going against like an old version. So latest and greatest version needs to be out there. So this basically just calls the endpoint to publish it, and the way it does that, it's just doing a post. So it just does a post to the endpoint for knowledge bases, and then the knowledge base ID, that endpoint, and a post lets it know that it needs to publish it. So pretty simple. There's no body or anything in that post. It's just make sure you got the subscription key again right here and post to that endpoint. Now, the next thing I need to do is I have a bunch of parameters that I need to send to my bot ARM template. So let's look at the bot ARM template now. If I come over here, we were looking at the QnA Maker one. Let's pull up the bot one now. And you can see this one's it's a little bit simpler, but it's still, you know, similar. I have a web app and then the bot service, right? So the bot service talks to the bot web app. And it has, but there's a lot of parameters, right? So I have like 12 parameters here, and a lot of these I need passed in. So like I need to know what's the app ID, what's the app password. I need to know, like in this case, I have an email channel. So the email address, the password, and then here's what we were talking about, the knowledge base ID, the auth key, the endpoint host name. So that's important. So I have to pass that in. Now, there was a complication I ran into because I have a lot of parameters. And so in this last task right here to basically create that resource group, I was passing in a lot of parameters and I actually hit the limitation. I don't know if it was like a Azure pipeline limitation or what, but if I put too many characters on this line, it failed. So I just kind of chopped all of them off. I probably should put all of them into a file, but I didn't really want to. Didn't really like using a file that much, but I did anyway. So what I did was I have this parameters file right here, as you deploy bot parameters, so that gets married up. So these are overrides right here. So it overrides whatever's in the file. Now, in my case, I go to the bot. Oops. So if I go to the bot parameters, I don't have that many, right? So I'm overriding. I do have a lot here. I have a lot of parameters here, right? So here's all these parameters I have here, but these are the ones that kind of have secrets. So I just put these in this file, and these are tokenized. So this just gets deployed, this is actually part of the, this gets pulled down by the pipeline when it checks out the repo. And then I have a step that will replace these tokens. And so that's what this step is right here. This step is going to I didn't put I did put a display name. Okay, so this step right here replaces the tokens in there. So basically what I do is those token names have underscore, underscore, and then name. As long as they match your build variables that you have, then this just does a big replace. That's all it does. So here's the folder where that parameters JSON file lives, and then this is the actual name, the JSON file. Shout out to Colm's on corner, who, in my opinion, his build tasks the replace tokens, and he has another one to tokenize files too. His are the best. I wouldn't use any other ones. So that's all this is. It's really simple. Like I said, it just comes in here. I have build variables that match up to each one of these, and that double underscore before and after lets that build task know, okay, that's what I need to replace. So that's what that does. So then once I get all the, I have that parameters file built up correctly, then I can call that last ARM template to deploy the bot resources. And that's what this does right here. So that's going to deploy those. Let's see here. Yeah, so that's it. That's all it does. So that's going to create all the bot resources, and it's going to put in the correct values into the bot app service. So if I go into the bot app service and I go to the configuration, I can go in here and take a look at, like, let's see, for example, that auth key that we want to look at. See, that's getting passed in, the endpoint host name to talk to QnA. Yeah, I can make that a little bit bigger. Yeah, the endpoint host name, and then the knowledge base ID. Now, something that you'll read this in all tutorials also, but you need to have a Microsoft App ID and Microsoft App password, and they have to be named exactly like this, because that's how your bot authenticates to the direct line, like the web chat bot. That's how it authenticates. If you don't have this, your bot won't work in Azure. It'll work locally, but it won't work here. And in fact, when I run this locally, I don't even have the Microsoft App ID and password here. I don't need it because when I run locally, I just use the emulator. I just, I start this up right here. I start up my service for the bot. So it's just an ASP.NET Core project. I run that and it's listening in on, I believe it's port 3978. Yeah, here it is right here, HTTP localhost 3978. I fire up my emulator. Make sure you're using v4. And then I can open it. And I don't pass in the app ID and app password. This is actually pretty useful though. Like if you get an app ID and an app password and you want to test to see if it works, you can input it in here, and this emulator will actually go out and get a token for your app using Azure Active Directory. And that's a good test. I did actually do that test, and I'm going to talk about the app ID and password in a second. I just want to show you real quick that, we're talking to the local bot right here. I can put breakpoints in my app and everything, but I won't. Just to show you, we're sending messages, getting responses back. And if you click here, you can see, let's take a look at here. Here's a message that I sent. Here's the JSON that's getting sent from this emulator to my service. And then my service is responding back right here with this card. So this was a dialogue. That was the dialogue we were looking at, the multi-turn dialogue. That's what's coming back here. It's the so inside of my service, I called out the QnA Maker service to get data back, and then my service sent this hero card back to the emulator. So the same thing happens in Azure. It's just a different client. So go ahead and cancel that. And it's got logging and everything there too, so you can kind of see how it works. So that's it. That's it. So now if I go into my bot, actually, we can probably run this real quick. Since I have all the resources created, I think what I'll do is I'll delete this knowledge base. So what that means, if I'm deleting this, that bot's not going to work. So I'm going to go in and make sure that the bot's broken. So I'll go in to test my bot using the test and web chat. And it's going to authorize. So it's authorizing. But if I type something in here to get something back, I should get a huge exception. I have it sending the exception back. You shouldn't do that, but just for demo purposes. So there's a huge exception that just happened there. So cool. That's because there's no QnA Maker service. We just deleted the knowledge base. There's nothing that services can't connect to they can't connect to the data source. So what I'm going to do is run this pipeline, not the bot pipeline, but well, actually, yeah, I'm going to run both. I'm going to run the I'll run the pipeline that's going to create all the resources, and then also deploy the bot, right? Because the bot needs to get redeployed. So I need to do the infrastructure deploy, because that's going to recreate the knowledge base. And then because the knowledge base, since it's a brand new knowledge base, there's new configuration. I got to pass that to my bot. I got to push that into the bot configuration, right? So my bot configuration, remember, here's the service for the bot. Go into configuration, and let's say, for example, the knowledge base ID. Well, it's got an ID value right here, but that doesn't exist anymore because we just deleted that, clobbered it. So I'm going to run my pipeline, and let's just run that. That's going to take a little while to run. It's not too long. All the resources are already there. While this is running, this is a good time to talk about the app ID. So when you create a bot on, going through the Azure portal UI, doing it manually, it's going to ask you if you have an application. They call it MS App ID, and then it'll dynamically create an app registration for you. And then when it does that, it'll say, hey, make sure you copy down the secret because you only have a one-time shot at getting that secret, and then it's going to be hidden forever because you need that secret for the MS App secret, and then the client. So it's really what it is. It's an app registration in Azure Active Directory. The app ID is the client ID. The MS App secret is the client secret. So let me show you how. Well, this is going through pretty quickly. Okay, so let's just take a look at that real quick while that's running. If I go into Azure Active Directory, go to app registrations, and you can see I created one for QnA bot. The thing you have to remember when you do that is that when you create this app registration, you need to make sure you have it set for all accounts in any organizational directory. If you don't do that, your bot authentication will not work. You have to choose that. So anyway, that's once you do that, that's cool. You come in here, you get your, here's the application ID, client ID, you copy that. Now secrets, you only get a one-time shot to get those. So like you can't see what the secret is. When you create it, just copy that down. But that's what you need. Let's take a look and see how we have an error here. See what happened here. Looks like, not sure what happened there. Well, that's okay. Let's troubleshoot it. So it looks like it did create it, but there was an error after it created it. So let's go back to pipeline here, and where it was creating it, looks like right here. So, not sure what happened. Let's run it again. In fact, let's take a look in QnA Maker. Yeah, so it did create it. It's not published, so I should be able to just run my pipeline again. It's gonna find it. I'll have to investigate what failed here. I'm super curious about what failed. Maybe I clicked on the wrong one actually. What actually failed? Yeah, I'm not sure. Exited with code 1. Okay, well, that's fine. Let's run that again. Just run new. Now, this is a good test actually because I want to make sure that knowledge base doesn't get created again. So it should find it, and it should know not to do that. While we're waiting on this, I want to show you another trick that I found. So that app ID, that was a big one, making sure that it allows any organizational account. The other thing was this little trick right here. I found out that you need this little deployment file for Azure App Service QnA. It has to do with the authentication. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but I found this on one of the tutorials on docs.microsoft.com. So I put that in here as well, and it seemed to help. Another thing was like in the ARM template. It took me a while to get that ARM template to work, but there was a trick in here that I had to do. This one right here, WebSockets enabled. You got to have WebSockets enabled on your bot web app, so the web chat client can talk to your bot. That was the other big thing. Let's see how this is doing. Okay, it's going pretty good. It just checked to see if it was created. It looks like, yeah, made the check. And then this one, nope, looks like it created again. So I have some logic, something wrong in the logic there. It's not checking that correctly. So that means I probably have two knowledge bases. If I refresh that, there's probably a second one there. Yeah, so my logic is off. It's not finding it, or something. I did something wrong in my PowerShell probably, but that's okay. You can refine that later. It's not the real point of this. So now it's getting the knowledge base ID, publishing it, placing the tokens for that ARM template parameters, and now it's deploying the bot Azure resource group. That should be pretty fast too, because that's already out there. So the main thing that I want to make sure that I have now is that new knowledge base ID, the three things: the endpoint, the auth key, and the knowledge base ID. I want to make sure that those are in Azure. Yeah, I think I accidentally closed that. So let's bring that up again. Okay, so let's go to, that's the bot. I don't want to go to the bot. I want to go to my app service. And I'm going to go to the configuration. And I want to make sure those new values are in there. So let's look at the knowledge base ID. And that's definitely a different value. If I go back to my knowledge base, oh good, so this finished. Okay, I don't need to deploy the code either. So this deployed to that. And then I have, yeah, so this bot, I don't need to run this pipeline because this just deploys the code. The code hasn't changed, so I'm not going to redeploy the code. It's kind of cool though that the code and the infrastructure get deployed separately, and they're all based on triggers. So that's why I was saying you can have GitOps with your infrastructure. So as the infrastructure code changes, it just automatically goes out and updates what's out there. Okay, so let's go back. So this is good. It looks like it got updated. Now I want to actually prove that. So that's 075E. I'm going to go over to QnA Maker, and I think that's probably, oh, I didn't publish that one. Okay. Let's refresh this. Okay, let's view the code here. And yeah, here's the knowledge base right here, 075E. And that's the one that's published. So cool. So now the big drum roll is I should be able to test my bot without getting an error this time. So I'm going to go into my bot, test in web chat. It's going to be a little slow at first because it's just starting up. You know, that service is cold. So started up fairly fast. So now when I type in, I should be able to, it should have what it needs to connect to QnA Maker service. So let's see if it does. And sure enough, it's getting me my answers back that I wanted. So this was this purpose of this video again was to show you some of the things you need to do to go beyond the basic tutorials that are out there on docs.microsoft.com for building a QnA Maker bot and really automating it and really, you know, putting the DevOps touch on it, sprinkling the DevOps on it for your infrastructure and for the code itself. So thank you, everybody.